We're good to go.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Josh Burkus, and I am your MC and cat herder du jour. This meeting is being recorded for everybody on here. And as usual, we are going to be starting out today with a demo. We've got a number of things on the agenda. So we're going to have a demo from Ivan on local development. Reports on release reports from Dawn on 1.7, Anthony on 1.6, and Marcin on 1.5. And then reports from several SIGs, API-Machinery, AWS, OpenStack. Wow, quite a bit from OpenStack. And then I believe a proposal for a new SIG-Azure SIG. And then a short presentation by Dan Cohn, the president of the CNCF. So, given that we have a full schedule, let's go ahead and get started. Ivan, are you ready to do your demo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me share my screen. So can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So my name is Ivan Shudunov. I work for Mirantis, and I'm going to give a demo of project I've been working for some time. It's a Docker and Docker-based local cluster solution. And it was discussed quite a bit on SIG cluster lifecycle, and I gave a demo on yesterday's Contribex meeting. So basically, what's this project is about? We all know that there are a couple of widely used tools for local development, namely Minikube and Local App Cluster. But with Minikube, Minikube is currently not very well suited for development of Kubernetes itself, because it's rather hard to update the binaries from local Kubernetes source. And both of these tools also run single node clusters, and sometimes you may want to have a real multi-node cluster, and you may want to run end-to-end tests for it. So I'll just start the tool now in a couple of windows, one with pre-built image, and one which will build Kubernetes from source. Actually, because the time allowance, I am cheating a bit. I already did build Kubernetes, so it will build faster. So, and while it starts, clean it, and I will describe in further details why this project is needed, I think. So here I'm started it in build mode. It will build Kubernetes and kubeadm. It's using kubeadm to deploy multi-node cluster on Docker and Docker. And here I'm starting it using pre-built image. So what are scenarios that this tool covers? For example, you are working on Kubernetes, and you may want to run some end-to-end tests or write some that require multiple nodes. And maybe your machine is not very powerful, and you don't want to use paid clouds. Still, you want to use some remote machine for your work. And the currently built container can build Kubernetes on a remote machine, but running test clusters is harder. You will have to use rsync constantly and maybe run local app cluster somewhere. Also, you may be using a Mac. There can be some separate list of problems if you are a Kubernetes developer on Mac. Another scenario is that you may be working on Kubernetes, some kind of Kubernetes extension, and you may want to run it on CI, and if you want to use Minikube, you will have to deal with nested virtualization, because say if you are using Travis CI or something, it will be complicated thing to implement. And also you may, and if you are using local cluster, you will need to build Kubernetes from source every time you run your build, or devise some complicated scheme with Docker image containing binaries or something. And maybe you just want to run Kubernetes cluster on in your Travis. Or you may want to give a simple demo script that will start Kubernetes and your extension with it, and so users can play around with it, and running VM for it may be overkill when users already have their Docker. Also, say if you are using Mac, you likely already running Docker, and if you say use Minikube, you will have to run another VM, which can cause its own set of problems. So now we see that this is kind of a faster machine, and here Kubernetes was built, and the cluster was started with freshly built binaries. And now I can try to run an end-to-end test against it. Sorry, wrong path. So here also helper script that helps one to run end-to-end tests. It builds end-to-end test runner, and it's quite handy when developing end-to-end tests and running them locally. While it completes, we see that here the cluster already started. Actually, the first cluster startup takes quite some time. But if it makes a snapshot of cluster configuration, so if I start it again, it will take maybe under 50 seconds here. And here, if I have time to restart it, it will take maybe 40 seconds or less. So cluster restarts are quite quick. And if you broke your cluster, you can restart it in a jiffy. Basically, these tools covers such situations where standard tools may cause some problems. Also, it may be handy if you say want to change something in kubeadm and test it quickly. So it may be also handy here. Now concerning this CI, what I was speaking about, actually kubeadm DND cluster has its own CI. One of its features is that cluster, despite being Docker and Docker cluster, it's kind of realistic in the sense that, for example, it can run multiple CNI implementations such as Flannel, Calico, and Weave. See, for 1.6 I have some flakes with Flannel and Weave. They do work, but flake often on CI, so I temporarily disabled them, but I think I'll fix it shortly. Here you see multiple test cases of DND cluster running on Travis. It's some of them use pre-built binaries of Kubernetes, and some of them build Kubernetes from source. You can tell from build times. Here's another example of DND cluster usage. It's Vertlet projects. It's CRI implementation that runs VMs. There was a demo of Vertlet here some time ago, actually. And here you can see that you can download a simple script and run it to play around with Vertlet. That's thanks to DND script. And also the INT cluster is used for CI vertical project. The project has its rough edges currently, and probably its downside is that it's mostly a collection of shell scripts. But I'm going to rewrite it in Go, and I made a proposal. I put it in to the community repository about the new tool based on the same idea, but basically written in Go and with more clean configuration structure. So basically, you see here end-to-end test passed. So basically, that's all, except maybe I can just restart it without rebuild and see if it indeed will happen rather quickly. It may be made even more fast because kubeadm is not rerun when you restart the cluster, just snapshot is reused, and it spends actually most time waiting for the cluster, for when the cluster is ready, so you don't have some non-ready pods when it completes. So here you can see the list of pods in the running clusters, and everything is running in the K. So the dashboard is installed out of the box. So basically, you can take a look at dashboard also. So here, let's see. So default kube system, and you see here some pods are running, and it's all very quick and nice. So probably that's all. Any questions?
You seem to have a couple of comments that are in the order of, wow, that looks really cool. And I saw a couple of thumbs ups. So neat stuff.
Okay, great, thanks. So, any more questions?
Doesn't look like it. If anybody has a question, speak up now, or you can ask it in the chat later.
Okay. So
okay. Thank you very much for that demo.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Oh. Okay, some compliments on the tool.
Josh, you may be breaking up because we're not hearing you if you're moving forward.
Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about current development progress. So, Dawn, you have a report on 1.7 with some slides, apparently.
Dawn.
Yep. Someone can help
me?
Yep. So can someone help me to bring up the slides?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that and share them out.
I just give a quick updates.
Oh, except I don't have permission on your slides, so I can't bring them up.
Oh. Let me find the slides.
In the notes.
They're linked from the notes, yeah.
Yep, I'm working on it. I just am running on 2 different computers and looking at things differently. So I'll pull them up.
So I can start anyway. So the Alpha 4, it is scheduled yesterday. So before the couple of days ago, we noticed there's some flakiness in several critical builds, including the node and also the serial and the slow scalability. All those things.
It won't show there. I'm presenting through.
Thank you.
I'm presented through Zoom to Hangouts as well, and we won't see it in Hangouts.
So we have the several. We found those weakness in several builds, but mostly is caused by the either test itself or it is the test infrastructure, because we are in the middle of some of the test build changing to the new infrastructure pro, supposed to be better. But yesterday we do identify a real release blocker, which once the Kubernetes proxies restart and pretty much just level can work functionally. So thanks the SIG network hard work, and they revoked the offended commit, and now everything looks green so far, and still have the flakiness, but it is not blocker for the alpha release. So we kick off the build this morning. So we'll send out the update shortly after build finish, and hope community can help us to validate new build. Another thing it is we are working on the upgrade test grid. We put those some of the upgrade tests, the Kubernetes school test before I announced that last week, and we have more upgrade tests come in, but we switched to using also new test framework, and that's running some problem. But all the tests should be finished. I just merged one fix for the test info for that one. So we should have the 1.6 upgrade to the master branch shortly. And then we plan to choose one. I mentioned that last week. We plan to choose one as the blocker, the pre-submit blocker. So currently we target for the only upgrade master, and from the 1.6 to the master branch. So that's one for the first candidate. So we are going to maybe have more as the blocker. So another thing, what I want to mention that, so release team is talking about a new process about the issues and the feature issues or regular feature request. And there's the certain proposal, and there's a tools build. And so next week, I think the Garrett is going to give the demo for that one. And so last things it is code freeze scheduled on June 1st. So far, there's no change. And I hope the community, that especially each SIG groups, goes through their feature report and goes through their feature requests and also back, and kind of have some progress or status update. So that's all for this week. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, and
so just one note from me regarding the features. It's yet another friendly reminder that if you're a feature owner, please update your feature description. I've been grooming through our backlog, and I've noticed that most of you have updated them already, but some of the features are still not updated, and it's really difficult to find the real status of the feature. So please, if you're owning the feature 407, please update it. That's all from me.
Yeah, I want to double down on what Ihor just said from the PM SIG perspective. We use the features repo to inform SIGs about each other's work. We also use it for the release notes, and we use it for the blog posts. So if you're expecting to be part of any of those, please provide a description that can be used in release notes. Also, for the PM SIG, we're going to be inviting feature owners from the different SIGs to come and give brief demos, and so we'll have a schedule for that.
okay, well, thank you. So everybody get their feature descriptions in. So now let's hear about 1.6 and 1.6.4 from Anthony.
Hi, this is Anthony. So for anyone who didn't see the announcement, in 1.6.3 we introduced a regression that could cause some pods to not start that used to work before. So we sent out an announcement saying, please don't use 1.6.3 yet. And we're working on a fix that we're going to put out a quick 1.6.4. That ended up taking a little bit longer than we thought to get that fix submitted, but that is now cherry-picked into the 1.6 branch. And what's next is to cut 1.6.4, but we plan to cut 1.6.4 only with the fixes for that critical bug and one other regression that came up with a kubelet panic that also was new in 1.6.3. So those two bug fixes are the only things that should go into 1.6.4. And that's not a very well exercised process. So that's still to be determined how long that's going to take, but I'm working on it now.
Okay, thank you. And an update on 1.5 from Marcin. Am I pronouncing that right?
I don't believe Marcin is here. Do we have a 1.5 update? Any
There's
update?
no
Okay.
build.
Okay, we have no update on any 1.5 patch or point releases. So
Okay.
or upcoming ones.
Okay. Well, in that case, let's move on to the SIG reports. So, Daniel, you have a report on API-Machinery, and there's already some questions in the notes, so we'll take those as soon as you give your report.
You can take the questions first if you want.
Okay. Chao Zhu had a question regarding an API issue. Chao, are you on here?
I'm looking at the chat log. I don't see that.
It's not in the chat log. Hold on, let me paste it from the doc.
Oh.
There we go. But if he's not on the call, then
yes, I plan to discuss that.
Oh, good. Okay. Why don't you
go? SIG-API-Machinery is focused on extension points for this release. So we're working hard to get user API servers aggregated with the main API server. We're also working to get initializers moved out of process. Initializers are one of the mechanisms that we're going to use to implement admission controllers out of process. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can't do without building code into Kube API server, and the goal is to have in solid alpha or beta these extension points so you can build stuff out. So let me just, sorry, I don't have the slides or anything, but I would like to pull out a couple things that are from our notes. A few meetings ago, Phil demoed a API server SDK proof of concept. So this would let people build their own API server or make it easier to build your own API server. So you should have to change just a few lines of code instead of lots of lines of code. We've had a lot of discussions about the design of the aggregation layer, in particular, what sorts of network traffic it may send, and what are the requirements for network traffic from control plane elements. This is basically control plane elements need to function in multiple different network environments. Sometimes the master nodes are not in the same network as the worker nodes. So this is the stuff that you find when you're starting to put it all together. Let's see the other thing. Yeah, so we have solidified the proposals for the admission controllers and initializers that I mentioned earlier. The Clayton's main proposal has been merged. Chao has a design which is probably going to get merged today, and hopefully we'll have that operating by the end of the feature freeze, or before the feature freeze rather. And we also had a lively round of discussion last time about accepting more clients. So I think you can look for more clients in other languages in the future. Finally, we've had a long-standing, sorry, I'm distracted by the chat log. I'll answer that when I get to the end of what I was going to say. We have a long-standing desire in API-Machinery to package up our code in ways that respect the different users of it. So if somebody wants a client, they should be able to get a client without vendoring the entire, like you shouldn't need to vendor kubelet to get a client. If you want to write an API server, you shouldn't need to vendor kubelet to get a API server. So unfortunately, our code has a bunch of little spaghetti strands that cross components, and the final thing that's blocking us from completing this process is the API types themselves. So right now, the client Go library has a copy of the API types, which is totally fine if you're using only the client library or only code in the main repository, but people need to compose our various components. And if you try to import both API server and the client, suddenly you discover that you have two copies of the API types and they don't work together. So the final step in this process is to actually split the API types themselves into a repo that both the client libraries and the other libraries can depend on. And at that point, we can clear up a lot of the weird stuff in the staging directory. I'm sure you've all noticed that some of the files in the staging directory are canonical in the staging directory, and some of them are like copied and assembled from other places, and that is super confusing. So to make a long story short, the current plan of record is that after the feature, the code freeze is over, Chow has done a bunch of work to do that separation, and we think that's the least disruptive time to actually go ahead and put that in the repository. So if you have thoughts on that, the issue posted in is probably the best place to discuss that. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. So we plan to do this as like the first thing after the freeze is lifted. We've done other invasive changes like this in the past. So you know, if you need to do an invasive change like this, the way to go about it is to talk to the release branch manager to coordinate that. Okay, so questions in the chat. Any thoughts on a build your own API servers tutorial? So I have to say I'm focused right now on making it possible at all. So I think we're going to need tutorials and SDKs and pretty documentation before we can exit beta. But I think at the moment we need to focus on making this possible. That's this part that has to work before the feature freeze. After the feature freeze, then we can think about fixing things that aren't blocked on feature freezes, like tutorials and Phil's thing. Let's see. Okay, is that? Did I cover all the questions?
There's also a question about API aggregation in 1.7.
Yes, so the current plan is that API aggregation will be available in 1.7. The aggregation layer will be built into Kube API Server. Yeah, so there's unfortunately I tracked it in a org level project, which apparently non-org members don't have access to. But if you are an org member, you can look at the aggregation GitHub project to see what are the remaining items and what we're working on. Let's see. Someone asks, is this motivated by Kubernetes core strategy? I think the answer to that is got to be yes. We can't scale the current process where everybody who wants an API builds something into Kube API Server just isn't it isn't scalable. So we've got to separate this. We've got to unblock people who want to experiment. We've got to make it possible to turn APIs on and off without invasive code changes. So yes. Any other questions?
Looks good. And we got a link to the aggregation proposal. So,
as always, it could probably stand to be updated at this point.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next SIG report we have Mackenzie appears to have quite a bit from AWS SIG. So, Mackenzie.
Hey, and apologies, they're doing drilling in my building. So if for any reason, like, it sounds like there's this huge shaking, it's because of the drilling. But yeah, so updates from SIG AWS. First, sort of a meta update is that we have been, for the past couple of months, doing this very specific format of SIG meetings, where we always start with intros and updates from everyone in the group on the progress or any of the challenges that they overcame in the past couple of weeks. We assign roles in the beginning, so like note taking and stuff, and then we always have demos, of course. And we're thinking about introducing presentations from different members on how they're implementing Kubernetes on AWS at their companies, kind of give real world use cases. And this has been pretty well received. So that was just an update on our format, and particularly just around the intros every time. I think it may seem like everyone knows each other, but to facilitate an environment where new people can always be welcome or feel welcome, it's good to keep those intros, I think. And then in terms of updates from the work we've been doing, we're prescribing IAM and Kubernetes and publishing documentation around that. And we want to sponsor Kube2 IAM as an incubator project. We're continuing to work with the CNCF on a CNCF-sponsored AMI, which background context was that this is Weed's idea to offer community-driven base AMIs in the AWS marketplace. And the next steps are planning the AMI creation process, and we're waiting on an update from Weave around that. And then finally, we have 2 upcoming demos this week. The first is from Henning at Zalando on his work around an external DNS incubator project. And the second is from Josh from CoreOS, who's giving a demo of the ALB work on AWS work that we've been doing with Ticketmaster. So those are the big updates from us. And Brandon just linked, to the Kube2 IAM. Let me see, are there any other questions? Nope, I think that's good. Any questions?
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you very much. If you think of a question later, put it in chat, and I'm sure the team will still be here to answer it. Okay, so next SIG, SIG-Openstack. Ihor and Steve.
Yeah, here I am, and I see also Steve in the chat. So let me give a brief update on the SIG-Openstack Summit, first of all, and Steve will give a brief update on what's happening within the SIG and what conversations specifically we had at OpenStack Summit. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all the people who have joined OpenStack Summit on behalf of Kubernetes community. I was really surprised to see so many faces from Kubernetes community, and especially people who have joined our Kubernetes Day that has happened on the second day of OpenStack Summit. Also, I would say that comparing to the previous summits, the overall percentage and the overall proportion of Kubernetes-related talks to Kubernetes non-related talks is much higher. So I would say that I can say that like almost a half, but approximately that amount we had of Kubernetes-related talks at OpenStack Summit at the general track. I'm not speaking about Kubernetes Day that has been fully dedicated to Kubernetes talks. So we also had several meetings at OpenStack Summit, and one of them was Kubernetes OpenStack on Ops on OpenStack feedback session during the forum. So probably Steve, you can bring us more feedback from your side.
Yeah, so there's a lot of notes in the Etherpad from that session. The main thing that came up, and it's kind of a theme, I think, of some of the keynote demos during the week as well, was there is a desire among the operators to have a less monolithic approach to the cloud provider integration than we have currently. So be able to pick and choose which of the OpenStack services they use with Kubernetes. So on that note, the main kind of feature work that is we're still trying to achieve within the OpenStack SIG is around the externalization of the cloud provider. So this is an ongoing effort. DIMS in particular has at least put a mirror of the code across on OpenStack infrastructure, and he and Chris Hoge were working on how to set up test infrastructure around that. But we still have a fair bit of work to do there, and they are looking for additional contributors, which we're trying to find them. We are also trying to find some additional owners for the Cinder integration, because currently I think there's just the one person from SIG storage on there, so we want to have an OpenStack focused person on that as well. Cinder being, to the earlier point about breaking down the monolith, Cinder is probably the service that we're closest to being able to use individually, because there is a separate volume implementation for that in a yet to be merged, I think, pull request, but pretty close to being merged from memory. I think that was it, other than just seconding Igor's comment that there was a lot of Kubernetes-related discussion, a lot of momentum around the Kubernetes to assist with deployment of OpenStack services, so particularly the OpenStack Helm project and Core Kubernetes, and then growing momentum around this less monolithic approach. So there are a lot of demos showcasing using just one individual OpenStack service with Kubernetes, or a subset of what we would normally consider the core OpenStack services. And that's it, I think, unless there's any questions.
I don't see any questions from the chat.
Alrighty then.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And now we have a proposal for SIG, for an Azure SIG. Looks like Jason Singer.
Hey there, everybody. Yeah, so I had put out this notice to SIG, or the Kubernetes dev and Kubernetes users list to propose the creation of SIG-Azure. And it had quite a bit of information in it. I went and looked back at, there was a sort of a stalled attempt to make this happen before, but since the time that happened and now, there's been a tremendous amount of motion forward in terms of the Azure Container Service and just generally Kubernetes love across the greater whole of Microsoft, which is super cool because it represents, I think, a huge untapped pool of resources that we'll be able to hopefully channel into the project. So I feel like this SIG is an important bridge for those activities, and I think it's time to look into this. And one caveat, because I know there's concern about overlap with the potential of other meta SIGs related to cloud providers in general. I put in the proposal because I'm not a fan of SIG sprawl. If there's something better that comes along that meets everybody's needs, SIG-AWS, SIG GKE, or whatever those look like, we can definitely look at a meta SIG for all those and deprecate our SIG if that happens, because I don't want to keep SIGs around just because they're precious. So what I'd be looking for is anybody who has any strong objections or feels like that's not the right move, and we can talk about that. But otherwise, I would love to get a lazy consensus approval for it so we can start forward on trying to get all that organized.
I don't know the details of this, but wasn't there a movement to have a SIG cloud where, because I guess my question is, if we have like a SIG AWS, a SIG GCE, a SIG Azure, a SIG, whatever the new cloud provider are, and they silo up, are we not going to be able to leverage the ability for them to to solve problems together, and are we going to create an opportunity or a situation where we're duplicating effort? There was a SIG cloud proposal, or what happened to that? I'm just curious.
It has gone off the radar as far as I can tell. I couldn't find it. I know that Brandon was looking at it, but I have not seen any movement on it, and it doesn't seem to have gotten traction. Like I said, if SIG Cloud comes to fruition and somebody's super passionate about it and it meets the needs that I outlined in the SIG proposal for SIG Azure, I'm totally behind it. I'd say in the time before that happens, I would personally stake myself to communicate with the other cloud provider SIGs to make sure that we are communicating across, because like we have the same problem in operations, right? There's a million different ops focused groups, and it's until we get a really good handle on the meta layer of governance, which hopefully we're going to be sorting out soon. We're in a pickle for all that.
Okay.
My concern is that by creating more and more SIGs, and you are right that there is already a SIG AWS, there will be less incentive to converge later on because it will be easier to do something proprietary for a specific cloud. And I mean, the promise of Kubernetes is that you do have the same experience. And it's true that it's about the portability of workloads, but with the kubeadm, for example, we try to do an effort that will also be for the cluster ops tools. It's about like doing something bigger for the community in Kubernetes versus each cloud. So maybe we can take this effort and.
I think it's I'd like to. I don't want to see a situation where we defer current users' needs because we believe that there's some beautiful future out there. And as Jace said, you know, we're 100% on board with the idea of a SIG cloud, but given that we have a SIG-Openstack that just reported and a SIG-AWS that just reported, and we have known users who are out there trying to get help, sometimes in SIG windows, sometimes on the main lists, I think having a place where we can have people come in and talk and plan is a short-term solution for current needs of the project. And you know, we're not trying to do anything to make it not work with any future plans that may produce a beautiful, perfect future.
I understand, but you know, I can look, for example, what Daniel presented and the investment that we are making right now, for example, on extensibility. This is something for the bright future of Kubernetes, something that we need, and we could have maybe gotten away without doing that. So how are we going to make sure that we'll get to that?
Well, I guess this is a very different thing, right? Like extensibility is a totally new effort, not a place where we already have users, we already have existing work done, we already have people who need support and a place for them to discuss, as well as several other parallel groups. I think that at a project-wide level, if we decide that we need to have some other SIG, then that's something that someone's going to need to lead out. But I think that pinning on creating a new SIG just because we have a belief that there's some better thing out there, it seems to not be supporting our current users that we have right now.
Yes, the reason, by the way, I raised the extensibility because it's also a matter of prioritization and where we invest engineers and everybody has users. I definitely don't want to hold things back, and we can. And it doesn't seem like the leadership summit, I don't know if it's the right place to do it, yes or no. But if we won't take any action about alignment of those SIGs, then nothing will happen. We know that, you know that.
Sure, and that sounds great. But Chen, are you saying that you want, Chen, are you saying that you want to block the creation of this SIG?
No, I want to see that we take actions to do alignment, because I agree with Jason.
How about we adopt the creation of the SIG, and then at the Leadership Summit we can discuss SIG Cloud and that sort of stuff with the various cloud provider SIG users.
I have a different question, which is this SIG going to have critical mass? Like, I didn't see any follow-up on the proposal from any Azure contributors.
Yeah. So Koros, I just haven't had time to get back to the thread. We're happy to be involved as well. We have integrations and users. So.
I just want, I don't have the opinion about this particular SIG, but I do have the observation. So we have to create tons of the SIGs, and I'm really, really worried about the coordination. It is, no matter it's as the release manager, or it is just regular SIG, like the one of the SIG lead. For example, it's my fault, like there's the Windows runtime, related runtime approach us, but we just don't have the bandwidth that time to handle, so we suggest the SIG Windows long time ago. So, but the problem is there's not really alignment, and we just recently found, okay, I recently went to the SIG Windows meeting, and I found, oh, actually they are rely on certain things, but because there's no coordination, no alignment, and we just accidentally to remove some of their features. And then we have to do some extra stuff, the checking, but nobody really report to us. Nobody have like they say, oh, here's SIG node, here's the SIG Windows. The PI, the proposal is not reviewed by us. The PI is not reviewed by us. The feature planning is not reviewed by us. But the code, it is somewhere, and it's we already announced deprecate code. So nobody knows, and that's removed. So if I don't go to the SIG Windows and we don't know those kind of things, so there's nothing happen.
Yeah, I agree.
It makes me
SIG to SIG communication is a big problem, and it's something that we're trying to address with the governance stuff. That's actually one of the prime things we're trying to address with the governance.
Yeah, Yeah. This doesn't sound likely to get resolved on this particular call, though, in the next 30 seconds, which is when we would have to resolve it.
Well, can I actually clarify that it's not, I don't see any contention about SIG-Azure, it's contention about the meta layer of governance. So I would say that the lazy consensus that I've heard so far is that there is backing behind it from CoreOS. There's a lot of people at Microsoft and whatnot that it seems like that is fine, and we defer. If there's a SIG cloud, we'll be the first ones to help support that, I guarantee it.
So could people who support SIG Azure and plan to participate please +1 the thread on the email thread so that we can have an official record of support for that?
Yeah, will do. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Excellent plan. But now we actually need to jump along to the next item on our agenda.
Yep. So, Dan, CNCF update.
Hi there. Let me go ahead and share that screen. If you could paste the URL in as well, it might be easier for folks to just play it locally. But hi, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to present shortly. I'm the executive director of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which hosts Kubernetes. And I think folks are the developers in the community are sort of vicariously aware of us. But I just wanted to spend a few minutes and give you a little bit of an overview of how we're interacting with Kubernetes. I think the most important slide in this deck is the very final one, which is my contact information. That although I might have a second to take questions here, if you have thoughts or things you'd like to do differently, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to discuss any of these areas with you, or new things we should be doing, or things we should do differently. So CNCF is a little less than 18 months old. We're part of the Linux Foundation. Kubernetes is the original project that we host, but we're now up to 9 here, and in fact, the container network interface is going to come in as our 10th project next week. And these are our platinum members that support us. The basic idea for what we're doing on slide 3 is that we try and support these projects. We think a lot of them can then be useful in commercial products that can provide profits to companies that allows them to reinvest into those projects. So we're trying to help enable this ecosystem by creating trust between different participants in these communities. CNCF has a governing board, which is made with vendors, and they have a marketing committee. But interestingly, they don't have the ability to bring in new projects. That's all there's a 9-member technical oversight committee, of which Brian Grant on the call is a member, and several other well-known folks. They're the people who can actually approve new projects and look for what kind of resources those, and provide a resource to those projects. We also have an end user board and some other parts. Here's the list on slide 5 of the members of our technical oversight committee. 6 of them are picked by the governing board, 1 by the end user board. Those 7 picked the last 2. I would encourage anyone who wants to learn more about this to please consider joining our technical oversight committee call. It's a public call. It's on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific time. There's also an open mailing list that I'd encourage you to participate in if you're not too flooded by traffic. And then this is a preview of some work that we've been doing at CNCF to talk about the different projects, and particularly Kubernetes and how unusual it is. And so this is a log chart where the x-axis shows the logarithmic commits, the y-axis is the number of pull requests and issues. And you can see that Linux kernel at the top right is in its own category, but separate from that, Kubernetes also at the top is really far away. And again, this is a log chart, so a little bit of distance has a huge difference between these. And you can click where it says interactive version to then be able to hover over these and see the specific statistics. So I think the main point that I would want to communicate to everybody here is, to the degree that you feel like Kubernetes is overwhelming and a huge amount of effort, and it's incredibly challenging to coordinate between 1,600 developers and such, there's very good reason for that. I would also quote the executive director of the Linux Foundation, our parent, in saying that Kubernetes is the Linux of the cloud. And so there's just a ton of attention and excitement around it. And CNCF, in a lot of ways, was formed in order to help that community in different ways. So I did want to address a real specific question, though, on this next slide, number 7, of why isn't there a Kubernetes Foundation? And just quickly, when Google obviously originated Kubernetes in 2014, 2015, it was always designed to be an open source project, but at least in principle, they could have gone 4 different paths with it, at least, from most closed to most open. So they could have made it a closed source project like Amazon Elastic Container Services, that you had to become a customer of Google Cloud to use it. They, on the next option, more open, could have had an open source project like Golang, which is obviously a very successful project. All of us use it, but it's still under Google's control. The third option is they could have created a Kubernetes Foundation that would mainly have just been the home of Kubernetes. But they made the decision, and then they brought in all the other partners from around the community, and all agreed to create this cloud-native computing foundation that had Kubernetes as the anchor tenant, but the whole idea was to support a constellation of projects. And the belief was that in doing so, they would have more support and be able to accomplish more. So why did they choose that scenario? Because, as I said before, we believe that a neutral home builds trust, increases the willingness of developers to collaborate, contribute. And when you look at some of the projects that we're now hosting, things like gRPC, that's a fundamental piece of infrastructure, container network interface that's coming in next week, hopefully container storage interface in the next couple months, container D, we think that all of these working together can have a bigger impact and spur innovation. So moving on to that next slide, what does CNCF do for Kubernetes? I did want to just walk through these real quickly. So the most important thing is providing a neutral home that different collaborators can work together and know that there's not one company that is in control or that can force things.
Well, I think we lost your sound,
We have a
Dan.
license scanning program. Oh, sorry about that. You got me back? Any better?
Yeah, we just lost the last 30 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Dan, you're breaking up a little bit. I suggest turning off your video, your camera.
Great. Yeah. But you can see my screen share still?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize. So going through that list again, we provide services like license scanning of all the core and the vendor code, legal guidance on patent and copyright issues. And I think one of the things that is in common with a lot of these is they're not particularly blatant, obvious things. We're trying to provide a set of infrastructure services and kind of help around the edges. We're not normally in this call or in other ways sort of jumping up and down screaming, but we are there to provide support when it's requested, and we are offering different kinds of support. So another area that's going to become more prominent is an open source curriculum, a training program, and then a certification program that's going to be going into beta test next month in June. We have a software conformance working group that is ensuring that when people say Kubernetes, it has means something and is compatible. We provide PR, analyst relations services. We run KubeCon. We attend external conferences and raise awareness of Kubernetes there. And then we are now taking over the management of Kubernetes IO, I will say essentially other than /docs, but the partner page, the home page, the kind of basic intro pieces to that. We're hosting and funding developer activities like Kubernetes port. We do some private infrastructure like a GitHub repo for the Kubernetes security team. And then we're essentially available for ad hoc activities. So this, there was a request from a group of folks to create a standard Kubernetes and neutral Kubernetes AMI that could live in the AWS marketplace. You need to have an organization to back that. And so we were happy to do that. That's underway. Then moving on to slide 9, so just some other wins where we finally convinced Slack to give us free access to the full version so that folks could do search and get access to the archive. We would say that we're helping to try and reduce some vendor tensions And we're doing things like taking over the logistics, but not the content for the Kubernetes Dev Summit. We also provide minority scholarships for our events. So there's this question of does CNCF market Kubernetes effectively? And I won't go through all these details. I just say that it is something that we work very hard at. And then when you go through slide 11, I think you can see some of the consequences here, which is I certainly don't in any way want CNCF to take credit for this. I think it's the Kubernetes project and the success of how useful it is that deserves it. But the key point is that as Kubernetes has come into CNCF, and then as we've been running KubeCon and doing other things for it, doing the press as of for the latest releases, etc., you can see that growth has continued over time compared to some comparable projects. And on slide 12, you can see that we're now edging in towards OpenStack in terms of this mind share. On 13 is some slides about media coverage, showing it going up over time. 14 is a share of voice that you can see Kubernetes being featured more and more. Same with 15. 16 is actually some work that I put together just talking about how popular and successful Kubernetes is and different ways of measuring that. And then 17 is looking at some work that we're doing with Kubernetes meetup groups and other meetup groups. And I think there's been a little confusion here in thinking that cloud native meetups or CNCF meetups are different than Kubernetes groups. All that happens is we reach out to the existing groups out there and encourage them to register as a CNCF meeting group. And once they do that, we we subsidize food and beverage, provide swag, we have a speakers bureau, and other kinds of services. And then slide 18 is probably the only news that I'm gonna, has been this question of co-locating KubeCon and Cloud Native Con. And so I think many of you were at our event in Berlin. It was hugely successful. 74% of the content there was Kubernetes related. We do believe that there's a Peloton effect among projects, that they're able to slip into each other's slipstream. But all that said, the co-chairs for our Berlin and Austin event, Kelsey Hightower and Michelle Nurali, made the request that we try out separating the content more. And so we're going to go ahead and do that for our Austin event in December, where the Cloud Native Con content is going to be on December 6th. That's going to be an opportunity for all the CNCF projects, including Kubernetes, to present. But then we will have KubeCon on Thursday and Friday, December 7th and 8th, where all of the content will be Kubernetes related. So either Kubernetes directly or how these other projects work with Kubernetes. Slide 19 is just a look at the content for Berlin that shows that we were already, a huge amount of it was Kubernetes related. Slide 20 is showing this huge growth in conference. We've done up to 3,000. And then slide 21 just says why we don't do some things, which is that although we're open to them, we're somewhat hesitant to hire product managers or project managers or build cops or other folks because we're trying not to compete with our members here. So we are working with the Kubernetes leadership groups, and we're open to working with more folks to try and help provide resources and focus the resources. But the idea for the foundation has never been that the foundation itself employs the contributors. Last two slides, 22 is just saying that we do have meaningful budget available today, and we're particularly interested and focused on trying to help some of the infrastructure issues around Munchbot and Prow and other things, documentation that are causing challenges for the Kubernetes community. And we're also willing to take over budget responsibility for continuous integration, continuous registry infrastructure, the challenges that we'd be looking for the Kubernetes SIGs to develop consensus, create a transition plan, and that hasn't been a priority for folks yet. Slide 23 is really my final thought, which is that we at CNCF, at the Linux Foundation, in the governing board, etc., have this belief that what we're doing here is fundamentally a non-zero sum activity, that there's not a fixed amount of investment, of mind share, of development contributions, and that working together, we actually create a positive sum scenario that works much better than any of us working on our own. And so our hope is that going forward, the Kubernetes community sees that and feels that. And then finishing on slide 24, I would really encourage you to reach out to me by email, on Twitter, or via Slack if you do have ideas on how CNCF could do a better job, because Kubernetes is absolutely essential to us, and it's just we want to help out every way we can. And I will stop there so we don't go over.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dan. And thanks to the CNCF for supporting our project. And we are out of time for the day, so no additional comments. See everybody next week.
Thanks all.
Are we off?
Thanks all.
Thanks, Darren.
Cool.